Yeah, it might be time to add a couple of pictures to Elliot's Law. New pictures, that is. Welcome to When Black Men Talk, which is done inside Elliot's Law. Appreciate you giving me an ear. We've been doing this for quite a while now. I want to think back how many years from Black Men Talk, When Black Men Talk has been basically in existence, but it's been a little bit. And for those that have listened and for the new listeners of a period of time, again, I want to thank you very, very much. There's been some changes come to When Black Men Talk. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But I want to talk about two gentlemen that are attending Yale, juniors, Nathaniel Johnson and Sean Hargrove. These two young professionals have raised over 3 million venture capital in 14 days. They plan to start an AL power platform for professionals to network. So we wish them nothing but the best. As I spoke of change coming to When Black Men Talk, yeah, Black Men Talk has kind of expanded some. We do Common Ground now. Soon we'll be doing Up from the Ashes. But the change I want to speak of is that Mr. DeMaurice and Mr. Charles will no longer be heard on Black Men Talk. I want to wish them two cats the best. I appreciate the time and effort that they gave to the show. But we're going to do things in a different direction. And they're doing their sports show, The Squad. And I can't think of the boxing show, but I wish them nothing but continued success. But I'm off on my own for the time being. From time to time, I've had other guests come in, male guests come in. We talk about different subjects and different topics. But the conversation sometimes is just going to be myself, just going to be me. And that's new. And that's a change. And sometimes we fear change. And sometimes we shouldn't fear change. I'm not going to say sometimes we should never fear change at all. But I think sometimes we get stuck in, being afraid what's going to happen if I try to do something different. And it kind of puts us in a mode where we're questioning ourselves, we're questioning our confidence. And I want to talk about that a little bit. There's some factors that go into basically why we're fearing change. And the main factor is we fear the unknown. We think about what will happen if I do such and such. And sometimes we were looking for that guarantee. We want to know exactly what's going to happen, how it's going to play it out, what type of pitfalls are going to be there. And there's no way to basically understand that. That, for me, is when your faith has to come in. And when you're faithful and you just know that it's going to work out regardless, if you seek something and you change and understand that for the most part, God's going to carry you through, there's no reason to really ponder and spend a lot of time really thinking about the unknown. And then we think about the negative outcomes, what will happen that may not be positive. And that's where we have to take our focus out of that. Once again, with the faith, we can't focus on the negative. Focus more on the brightness that could be happening. What's the potential? What's can be gained? And then again, we think about the loss of control because realistically, we like feeling like we're in control. We have that power. We're handling things. And sometimes you start to change, you have to kind of release that sense of control, that grip to allow things to go forward. And I look at this as a major factor when it comes to change. I know we said why we fear changing, fear itself. And to me, fear is a paralyzer. For the most part, fear drains faith. If you think about it, if you're worried, you're afraid, you're scared, you're reluctant, you can't be stepping out of faith. You can't be moving in faith because you're wondering, okay, what could happen? Those things have to be cast away. Fear has to be moved out of the way. And fear to me is an unpleasant emotion. It's not something that make you feel good. Really, it kind of plays with your insides. It brings on anxiety, thoughts that should not be rolling around in your mind. And we need to start to understand when we're thinking about change, what's kind of holding us back? What's kind of pulling us back in the opposite direction? I'm going to bet more times than none, it's fear. It's really fear. And if we can find a way to basically deal with that, we can move forward with change a lot easier. The unknown lacks predictability. And a lot of times we wake up on a daily basis, we want to have things kind of predicted how we're going to, how things are going to go, how we're going to move in a certain direction. And that keeps us in a comfort zone for the most part. You feel comfortable and you don't want to break the routine. And if you break the routine a little bit or a lot, here comes the anxiety. Like I spoke of earlier, of the unknown, you're not sure how things are going to turn out. And the negative outcomes. Here again, the fear of failure, that sense that things may not work out. And a lot of times, failure can hurt mentally. It really can. It can do a little damage on our confidence, our self esteem. And what comes with failure, too, is embarrassment. And that's something I think that we really should try to handle and think about it. Because a lot of times we feel embarrassed for other people, what they might be thinking about us, what could happen. And if you learn to handle embarrassment and not focus on outside of it, just kind of internally learn to deal with embarrassment, it elevates you from not worrying about the negative outcomes. What's going to happen if such and such doesn't work out correctly? If you can kind of push yourself past that, you're in a level to where be more welcoming of handling change. So to me, that plays a significant way in the way we look at change because a lot of us don't like to be embarrassed. And I find the thing about embarrassment for myself, to kind of deal with it, I laugh at it instead. Instead of feeling embarrassed, I take and I flip it on the opposite side of the coin and I turn it into humor. Because to me, if you can find embarrassment a way to laugh at yourself, 'cause at least you tried, it doesn't ring. It doesn't bring on that anxiety. It doesn't do anything to your self-esteem. You just realize you're human. You did something that didn't work out. Find humor in it as opposed to basically allowing it to kind of damage your self-esteem. Control, what can I say about it? Basically in the beginning of any change that you look to start out on and venture into, you're not going to necessarily be in control. You're working to gain footage. You're working trying to get something started. And another thing about losing control, it's a word that we toss around from time to time, vulnerability. When you don't have that control, you feel vulnerable. It opens up the door for you feeling vulnerable. And a lot of times we want to run away from being vulnerable. We don't want to feel that vulnerability. We want to make sure we stay comfort. We want to stay in control and don't feel it. And you don't have to give up something. You have to release that. And again, in feeling vulnerable, it opens you up to different things. Again, possibly embarrassment. You know, feel as your confidence starts to weigh a little bit because anytime you try something different or move into a step of change, there's going to come some self doubt too. You're going to have those moments where self doubt is going to kick in and going to say, "Why are you doing this? There's no need." You have to kind of talk yourself out of that, move away from those doubts because self doubt can really kind of basically, along with fear, paralyze you and keep you from moving forward. And we have to be cognizant of that and always kind of think in a sense, I have this. And I'd rather try something, and if you want to use the word fail, and basically gain some knowledge, gain something from it, than to rather sit in one spot and basically not move forward. I look at the change that's come to When Black Men Talk for the most part. For all the years I've done the show and host the show, those two gentlemen were there. There's a change not having them there. So in a sense, I look at it now, instead of them, I have my cup of green tea. I'm going to rely more on that and move forward with that. Nothing against them, but for me, I have an idea, something I'm trying to achieve. And my approach is not to go back and go, well, what if it doesn't work? No, I'm working. That's enough for me. That's enough to push me through. I'm not thinking about the negative outcomes. There's no need to focus on that. I'm not thinking about the fear because within me, I feel like I have what I'm capable, whatever I need to do, it resides in me. So that mindset, whenever the self-doubt starts to kind of try to creep in, those are the things I tell myself. Those are the things I stand solid on. Those things I hold dear. So if you pull those things inside, you realize there's really nothing about change to fear. There's nothing about change to fear. You can always move forward. But change will do this to you as well. It can bring some stress. So you have to kind of ask yourself, how do you handle stress? Because ultimately, making change could open up the doors to some stress that you may not have had in your life prior to the change. So that's a question you may want to question yourself. And I think whether you're changing something or not, ask, how do I handle stress? And that question to me is huge for a lot of different reasons because stress has a negative way of affecting our lives, our bodies, our mind. It just does. And it's funny because stress doesn't walk up to your door and rings your doorbell. For some reason, it has a way just getting inside where you're not even paying attention to it. You can think you're blocking it and it finds a way in. How do you handle that? I mean, I just spoke of a couple of things earlier, but how do you really internalize and handle stress? And we all need to find ways, whether it's meditation, doing different things, exercising, whatever the case may be, to deal with stress because that's a common denominator that can really disrupt what's going on with you physically or mentally over a period of time. And again, it's not invited. We don't ask for it, it just shows up. Handling stress ultimately will have you to be able to handle fear of the change that's coming forth and stepping into change boldly and ready to take it on. So that's something we definitely want to keep in mind and consider. Stress, because stress again pops up when we have no idea when it's coming. But if you think about changing something or you think about doing something totally different in your life, the thought of stress will find you. It will just have a way of finding you. Now, change can come in many different ways. You could be basically working at a job that you may be considering to change. You may be in a career that you think it's time to move and do something different, and you may start again think about the unknown. What if I do whatever? That's when you have to kind of really set things out and kind of really look at the foundation of what's taking place and not get into the unknown. Don't get into the pocket of the negative outcome. Don't focus on all that, the embarrassment, the failure. Those are the things that are given to you without being welcomed or invited that will keep you standing still and understanding it. Sometimes we're in relationships that we know we should change from. We've been thinking about it, you thought about it, you know it's not really healthy for you or the other person. And if they're not, and you're not doing things to make the relationship healthy, maybe a change is warranted. And even marriages, people are living in marriages that should be changed. And I'm not advocating you get a divorce, but sometimes we're in situations where a change can be a positive, growthful thing, and for some of the risk factors I stated earlier, we find ourselves pulling back and not ready to move on and take a change or make a change in that sense. So something to think about. It sounds like it's a small thing, but when you really pull back the curtains and really start thinking about change, how it'll affect our life, and what I would like for us to do too, as we're thinking about change, go back through your life, a period of times in your life where you could have made a change to do something and you were hesitant to do so. We were reluctant to do so, and you probably chose not to do. And what were the reasons? What were those factors that kept you from moving forward? What was the thought process you was going through that kept you alienated from making that move? Because there's growth there. Now, I'm not saying you go back and penalize yourself for not making change if you chose not to make change or you're afraid to make change. Forgive yourself for that, give yourself grace, but at the same time, understand and realize, okay, I could have done this differently. And now bring that to the current day, learn from it, and use it as encouragement. Because our Father, our Heavenly Father, has encouraged us not to fear at all. But it's hard not to fear because fear is a fundamental human emotion. Again, it's one of those things that just kind of bring it kind of comes into your psychic, whether you wanted to or not. But if you kind of basically don't try to control it, if it's left unhinged where it just can run rampant, it will do damage in a lot of different ways. And that's something that we must truly try to start understand. Fear is not something that's not going to happen, but we're encouraged not to fear anything. And to me, taking that on as a mindset helps tremendously to move forward and deal with fear. And as I spoke earlier about being paralyzed, you can take the chains off, you can remove the straps, and don't live in fear. When I hear somebody speak of anxiety, that's what I'm thinking. And we all have individual trials and tribulations that we go through, but how do we handle them? Don't let fear be the one that gets in the driver's seat and steer. You stay in the driver's seat, keep your hands, both hands if necessary, on the wheel. Comfort and predictability gives us a strong sense of security. And a lot of times, that's another reason why we choose not to train. We want that security knowing it's going to be right. Things are going to be this way. I don't want to think about it now. And that's cool to an extent, but is that really living life? Is that really kind of enjoying and living life to fulfill? It's just to say, no, I'm just going to be this way. I'm going to keep it. If that's your choice, I get it. But in reality, the life I think we should be zesting for is to be open and be bold and not being afraid to open ourselves up to change, to grow, to be better, to improve, to help others. So that's where a lot of times, if we're choosing not to change, we're kind of putting ourselves in a situation where, I'm not going to say we're stuck, but realistically, you're going to be at a spot where things are going to grow around you. The flowers will grow around you and they kind of grow over you. In a sense, we want to grow stronger, taller than the flowers. We want to enjoy them. We want to stand tall. So when I thought about change and I said to myself, how can you talk about it? All this started to come. And realistically, to me, I thought it was a beautiful conversation. And I had this conversation with myself first before I have it here on When Black Men Talk. And that's what we're doing sometimes. I have the conversation with myself and then I will bring it to this platform. And again, I want to thank those for listening and listening in the past. Hope you will do continue to listen on. We're growing, man. The show is growing and moving a lot of different directions. I'm happy about it. And I'm gonna tell you, I drive with one hand on the wheel, which is my left hand. That hand is secure, and I'm gonna keep driving this. Thank you for giving me an ear. We'll be back real soon. So when Black Men Talk, you know who I am. I'm your host, Mark Elliott. And I said this before, and I'll say it again. God loves you, and so do I.